So hi guys, today we'll be talking about loops and then we will touch a little on scopes as well. So to hit the ground running, uh, what is a loop? So pretty much a loop is how do I put it now? A loop is when you need your program, right, to do certain actions over and over again until a condition is met. So let's say you want it to perform an action like saying hello world 5 times, right? Rather than having to type console.log hello world 5 times, you can use the loop, right? And then instruct it out. As long as this condition is true, as long as this set of things are true in this check in the loop, do console.log 5 times, right? And of course, the important question should be, okay, why do I even need a loop in the first place? And the idea of programming is to make your life easy, right? And at the same time, to there's a concept called dry, which is do not repeat yourself, right? So the essence is when you use the loop, it has the way of making sure you don't have to type things all over again, number one. And probably you want it to keep doing something until a particular result is achieved. For example, let's say you have a simple login system, right? And you want the user to provide the right password, which probably we've experienced. So it would ask you, what is your password? You put in the wrong password, it will prompt you again, what is your password? And it will keep prompting you until your password is correct. So in that case, you could say, while your password is false, right? Keep asking the user this question, what is your password? So at the point the user puts in the right password, then it can allow the user to proceed to the next phase of the program or the next phase of whatever you want it to be. Probably you wanted to just say, hey, welcome, or probably once the user signs in or provides the right password, you want to send an email to the user or you want to display a picture, whatever thing you want to do. But the idea is you want the question, what is your password, to keep repeating itself until something happens. So that's pretty much what a loop is. And it will make more sense if we actually show you this. So let me quickly fire up my code. Fire up. No, let me let me show you a sample. So the first thing you need is, we'll start with the for loop. So you can see here I highlighted the kind of loops, types of loops we have. We have the for loop, we have the while loop. So we'll start with the for loop. So for, and if you're using VS Code, once you type for, you should see this suggestion for you. So we have for each, for in, for off loop, but we're going to just use the for loop and the while loop. So if you click on the for loop and press enter, right? Let me do this again. Type for, you see the options and you type and you press enter. You select this one, the for loop, that is this one here, right? And you can even see VS Code has a way of explaining this stuff to you, which for now might not make sense to you. We just simply type this. And now we see this very intimidating or scary looking thing that makes no sense. But if you can remember from the conditionals we did last week, right? You would have noticed something similar at least. Notice first of all, we have the keyword here, which in this case is for. In the other module, we had an if, and then we have the parentheses. Disregard what you have in it for now. I would explain each of them to you. And then we have the curly braces, which signifies the block or the scope, right, of this particular for loop. So let's say I want to console the log um, hello world 5 times, right? Now the way I would have done this without a loop is to come here, let me comment this out, come down and do console. Why do I like typing? Log. So if you type log and press enter, it does it for you. Hello world. And then let me repeat this 5 times. So if you're wondering how I do this, is you hold shift and alt, shift plus alt down, shift plus alt, and if you press down, it duplicates it down for you. If you press up, it does it up for you. So let's say I want to console the log hello world 5 times. So that would be 22 to line 27. And if I should run this, I have hello world 5 times, right? Awesome. But what if I wanted to do it 100 times? That means I would have to come here and uh, do this and drag, and it, I mean, it's stressful. And what if VS Code didn't come with the functionality where we could use shift and alt, for example, And imagine we had to type this ourselves, right? That would defeat the essence of programming, which is let the computer do the heavy work. You don't need to stress yourself. It's one of the things. So we'll come back here and we're going to do this same thing, but this time around with a loop. So you would have seen array here, right? And for now, I haven't touched on array, so we'll get to uh, arrays later. Then I'm explaining data structures to us. So for now, we have um, let index 0, index less than array dot length, index plus plus, const element equals array index 1. Makes no sense. So now let's make it make sense. So first of all, we'll declare a variable, right? And we'll call it count. I'm going to assign it the value of 5. So now what this means is we want this root to run 5 times. If we put 100, it will run 100 times. So the count. So take note, we have a variable called count. And we're going to copy that variable and we're going to say while index less than count. Like this, less than count, right? So now the first thing you do in a loop is once you have the for and then you have a parenthesis, right? The first thing is you need an index, something that keeps track of the state of your loop, right? So the index is usually initialized to 0, and you can make it anything. So we can make it, we can call it shawarma if we want. I don't know why I like using shawarma. Or we can make it anything, right? So, but the standard is to always use index. So you could either say index or you could see I, right? So, well, we're going to use index, right? So while index, so let index be equals to 0 because remember the computer always counts from 0, right? And we do this because we want to start from the very first item, right? In whatever we're doing. So we have index equals 0 and then index less than count, meaning in this case, at the time of initializing or declare us writing this loop, index is 0, which we initialized here. And now we're saying while 0 is less than count, which count is 5. So meaning while 0 is less than 5, which is the next, and this is where our conditional is. This is where we are checking to see if it's time to break out of the loop, right? So this is the check, index plus plus. So now this simply means whenever you go through the loop, increase index by 1. So the first time it runs, index is 0. It checks is 0 less than 5? No. Then that's a false statement. So that is 0 less than 5. Yes, 0 is less than 5, right? And then a for loop would always run as long as a condition is true. So, or a loop runs as long as a condition is true. So once that condition becomes false, then it breaks. So index equals 0. Remember, index less than count, and count is 5. You can even see VS Code is telling us here. I'm pointing at my screen as if you can see. You can see. Okay, so yeah, you can see. Of course, you can see my screen. What am I saying? Okay, so you have index less than count, and you can see VS Code is even telling you, oh, count is 5. So meaning if I make count 10 here and come back, you can see to change count is 10, right? And that's the beauty about VS Code. It tries to make your life easy. So we are saying index is a number of type number, right? Remember we did data types some time ago. So while 0, which is index, is less than count, which is 10, index plus plus. So this index plus plus just simply means increment by 1. So when if you see plus plus, it means increment by 1. If you see minus, is it? Yeah, minus minus, I think it's decreased by 1. Yeah, but plus plus is what we use in the loop, right? So this without this loop will run forever, and I will show you, which is actually bad for your system, which is actually not ideal. That's what we call an infinite loop, meaning it keeps running forever because there is nothing to make it break. There is nothing to falsify this check here. So you can see the construct of a loop as this. The first, I won't call it an argument, but the first thing we do is to declare, sorry, is to declare or create an index, right? Then the next thing we do is we check the state of the index check the state of the index, yeah, which would evaluate to true or false at each time the loop runs. And then finally, we increase the index, right? So this is the essence of this is so we don't have an infinite loop, right? Because if we didn't have index increased at each time the loop runs, right? It would mean zero would always index would always be zero, and zero is always going to be less than 10. And since zero is always going to be less than 10, the loop would keep running forever. But if each time the loop runs, right, we increase index by one. So now the next time index is one, one is less than 10, no doubt. It runs again, index becomes 2, and it keeps doing that until index, let's say index becomes 9, right? By the time it goes again and increases index by 1, index becomes 10. Now 10 is not less than 10 because 10 is equal to 10. So that becomes a false statement and the loop breaks. So now once we do that, let's say we can ignore this because we don't need, okay, but what this simply means, we want to know what element. So if we're trying to print out each character in someone's name, for example, which we would do that shortly. But let's just comment this out first. And what we simply want to do is we want to console log, we want to log hello world, right? And now if I run this, you'll see we have hello world appear 10 times, right? If I make this 1000, which I don't know why I would want to, and I run this, you will see hello world appear 1,000 times. You can see it here. And to show you that it's actually appearing 1,000 times, let's come here. And in addition to this string, I want to add count, right? So I want to know what, okay, you can add a string. So let me just quickly introduce us to string interpolations quickly. It's a very simple concept. So rather than doing this the old way of having to, if I wanted to add another string, I would have to do this, right, or whatever. With string interpolation, I can just inject my variables into the string. So if I do this backtick stuff here, that is the symbol before number one on your keyboard, right? So you have this thing here, backtick, right? And then I can just say, okay, hello world, right? And add another maybe hello world, and the count is currently, or and the index is currently. So now, in order for us to inject or to, I don't know if interpolate is right, in order for us to have it display a variable or whatever we want, right, that is dynamic, we just add the dollar sign and our curly braces, and now we just pass an index. So now what happens is, this is your regular, this is a string, but the beauty is now within this string we can add a variable, right, or a value that would be displayed each time. So we don't have to use the other method where we have the string then plus. So the order would have done string hello world. The index is currently, that is the first string. Then we'll add a plus sign, and then we'll have another string which will probably be count, and then we cast it as a string, so that because you can't add numbers and strings together, the number has to be of a string of a string type. Right? So you have to string. That's a stringify. You have to make cast the number as a string. So that's what I was saying. So just know whenever you see this kind of symbol, right? It's called a backtick. It's used for string interpolation. So let me add that in case you want to do your research on it. String interpolation, right? I think I'll probably let me get a link for someone who for deeper explanation. String interpolation, JavaScript. Yeah, so you simply replace placeholders with in a string literal, right? And what is the placeholder? This. So you're telling whenever you come here, replace this placeholder, right? With whatever value it should be. And in this case, it's index here. So back to what it's explaining. So you see string wrapped in backticks and all that. So I think Mozilla is a good resource which we can use. So you can check Mozilla. So Template literals are string literals allowing embedded expressions. You can use multi-line, blah, blah, blah. So this embedded expressions is what is key here. So the embedded expression in this case is this index. So we could even do, we can literally do anything here. We could divide it by 2. We could check if it's true or false. We could check if it's an even number. We can do a lot of things here. But for now, we just want to embed the current index each time the loop is running, right? So if I should run this, I run this. Okay, so let me run this now. And it's 1,000. Why is it 1,000? So let's make it 10, or let's make it 5 so it makes more sense. If I should run this loop now, you can see hello world, and the index is currently 0, which is true because when the loop started, index was 0, right? And then the next time index becomes 1. But by the time, if you notice something here, by the time index became 4, right? The loop ran, and then index became 5 because remember we're always incrementing index here. So 5 is not less than 5, and that is why the loop stopped. So that's very important to always remember. This index here is what makes the loop keep running, right? But what if we wanted to probably stop the loop once index is 2, right? So we don't want it to run for the duration of the count. We just want, okay, once it gets to 2, stop this loop, right? Or once it gets to the first even number, we should stop. So in this case, we count 0 to 1 to 5, 2 will be the first even number, right? So yeah, this is the virtual program you could combine. Or do I leave this as a task? Okay, just know there's what we call a break statement. Awesome. Let me make this a task. So I'll make this a task. It will make you sweat a bit. And if I run it, the loop, sorry, would run just once because we're saying, okay, console.log and then break out of the loop. So whenever you use a break statement in a loop, it stops the loop prematurely, right? So I think we would have a task. Let me quickly put that out here so I won't forget. A task where you break out of a loop. That's where you break out of a loop once you get to the first even number. So probably we already know what an even number is. A number that is divisible by 2 that leaves nothing, right? So what do I mean? If we come here and we do, let me log 5 or 4 divided by 2, right? We have 2. But that's how you get an even number. It's that nothing should remain, meaning 4 is actually divisible by 2. So in programming, the way we do that is with the modulo, which I think I mentioned some time back. So with the modulo, we're checking, does anything remain if we decide to divide 4 by 2? And in this case, no, because 4 is divisible by 2, so we'd always have 0. If we have 6, same thing, would have 0 because 6 is divisible by 2. Also, we have 7. You see, we would have 1 here, right? If we have 19, we should have 1, I think. Yeah. If we have 199, I don't know what we would have, but we should have something. So we still have 1, exactly. So there's always going to be, what am I typing for Christ's sake? So once the number modulo 2 is not equals to 0, then you know it's an odd number, right? So you can simply write the conditional now based off of this, which is probably if index modulo 2 is not equals to 0, or if index modulo 2 right is equals to 0, in that case you know your if condition is checking for an even number, right? So in that case, break out of the loop, right? So that will be the task. That at least one of the tasks, because we'll have a lot of tasks after this video. So back to the loop. So now we have console.log hello world and the index is currently indexed. So and then I run the code and you see it runs just once because of this break statement. So I'm going to comment the break statement out. And to comment it out, you just come to the line and press Control and your backslash, right? Backslash, that is this stroke here on your keyboard. Then if you want to uncomment it, same thing. You come back to that same line and press the same. Click combine, control and backslash and it reverts. So we actually want to comment this out. And then I run this again. And now we can see hello world, the index is currently zero. Hello world. Sorry, yeah, exactly. Hello world. And the index is currently zero. And it does this until, remember, once the index becomes five is not less than five. Remember. So index was zero, zero less than five, yes. Zero, one less than five, yes. Two less than five, yes. Three less than five, yes. Remember, it's always incrementing index here. So that's all for a for loop. Now the next loop, which is actually the one you should be a bit careful with, is the while loop. So now this just keeps running as long as a condition is true. So first of all, and it's you have to find a way to falsify the condition. So we're still going to use count here. So we can say, okay, while count is less than, okay, while, yeah, okay, no. So we're going to do this. We're going to make count zero in this case, right? We're starting from zero now. So we're saying while count is less than five, right? Do something. So what can we do in this case? So let's say log hello world. And I want to show you what would happen when I run this code, which is actually a bad thing. But it's going to be an infinite loop. So node, and let me run this from the terminal. So node data types. That's the name of the file I'm using. And let me open it to the side of my screen. So if I right click here, sorry, not right click here. If I come to terminal here, how do you do this on the terminal? Okay, so if you come here and right click here, right? And I say, okay, move panel, right? Right. So watch what happens when I run this. It's going to run hello world forever. And you can see my system is going to run crazy at some point. But you can see this, right? And I just press Ctrl C to break out of this. Remember Ctrl C. Right, and you can see it kept printing hello world till like it's ridiculous, right? Why why did it do this, you might ask? In fact, it's so much I can't even scroll to the beginning. Right? You just keep printing hello world till God comes. Now I did this because zero, which is count, is less than five, and there is nothing to increment zero, right? So there's nothing to increase the count. So it's always going to run because zero is always going to be less than five. So the way to fix this is to come here and say, okay, whenever you run, at the end of doing whatever I want you to do, in this case, I just want you to console.log hello world. I want you to come down here and do count plus plus, right? Meaning increment count by one. And I don't think this should work because count is a constant, right? Let's try. Might be wrong. It's one of those days where I even forget things. Exactly. So now assignment to constant variable, blah 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 blah. We can't do this because, like I said, with variables, when a variable is constant, you can't reassign its value, right? So we're going to use let here, which would allow us to do what we're trying to do now. And if I come here and run it, you can see it ran just 5 times. Awesome. So why did you run 5 times? Because when we console.log hello world, right, we increment count by one. That is the plus plus. So to prove what I'm saying, let me show you the crude way I would have done this without using string interpolations, which I explained earlier. So I would have done plus count, and I don't think this, I know this would not work in Python. But let's see if JavaScript will surprise me. Okay, they can actually do this, but ideally you should not be able to add strings and numbers. They have different data types, but probably JavaScript does some form of casting for you behind the scenes, right? So when I say casting, it simply means I could come here and say, okay, string count. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, make, even though count is a number, right? I want you to cast it as a string. Which means I want you to make it a string. So it's as good as technically doing this behind the scenes, right? So, but turns out JavaScript does it for you. But for the purposes of doing the right thing, we'll do it this way. So you cast it as a string, right? So I come back here and I run it again. Now you can see hello world 0, which is true because count was 0 initially, and then count became 1, count became 2, count became 3, count became 4, right? So that's pretty much the while loop. You need to, the difference between the for loop and the while loop is this. In the case of the for loop, right, you already predefine when it should break out, which is, um, or you already provide for the breakout situation, which is you are checking is the index less than count, right? And then you're incrementing the index, right? You're doing it here. So no, you're not caught on the blind side. And whenever you use VS Code, it automatically does this template for you. So you don't need to bother yourself, right? But if you forget, it's possible to make a for loop act like a while loop, right? So meaning if we forget to do this, now this loop will not run forever. Why didn't this run forever? Sorry. Okay, that is strange. That's really strange. Okay. So I found my mistake. Sorry guys. I mistakenly stopped the first video. So this will be like a two-part series then, which is cool, but kind of annoying. Sorry about that. So now I just created a stupid bug, and this is what I did. Now I'm expecting this loop to run forever, and it's not, particularly because I did something silly. When I said index is equals to 0, index less than count. What is count? Count is 0. So of course 0 is not less than 0. So this loop would never run. So if I made 5, count 5 now, and I run this, so let me clear my terminal. I type clear, it clears up everywhere for me. Now, yours might not look like this because I'm using a Linux based shell or terminal, right? So yours would probably be Windows. So just in case, but it doesn't matter. All you have to do is just type node and the file. So in this case, my file is data types. Yours could be any name, but I think I would instruct you on what name to give the file. So when you're playing with this, whatever name of whatever file name you're using at the time of playing with this video, right? So now if I do node data types.js and I run this, it's going to run forever, and my system should run crazy at some point. So this just keeps running and it keeps running, and I have to break out with Control C. Now, why? Because I wasn't incrementing count here. I wasn't incrementing the index here. Right? So there was no way to falsify this loop, meaning it's just going to keep running for as long as God wants, as long as as long as the condition is true, which we don't want that. So remember to always in the loop find a way to falsify the loop. If not, as long as the condition is true, it will always run forever. And then another thing is you should always have the semicolons here, right? Without it's the semicolon is a way of ending an expression, right? So the first expression we have is or statement, sorry. So the first statement we have is let we declare an index. The next statement is we're increasing that index, we're checking if that index is less than count, right? But we don't actually need a semicolon here, do we? No, we don't. We actually don't need a semicolon here because this is the end of the expression. So just know in a loop you need this, right? You need to have the semicolons here. So, but in your regular JavaScript, not really, but because these are three statements we have here. So that's why you need the semicolon in this within the parentheses, right? So having said that, let me clear my very scary looking terminal. And now let me clear it again. So yeah, so this is pretty much loops. And then what we can do is now whenever we're running a loop, the scope of that loop, like I said, is whatever we do within the block here. So meaning we could have, let me say, a variable called, uh, we could even have a variable called const. I'm so bad with names. Let's call it const sample equals 53, right? And I could come here within this for loop and say, you know what, const. sample equals 20, right? Log sample and then break. So I just want this loop to run once, right? So I'm going to comment out this while loop, right? And now if I run this, what do you think will happen? Do you think we would have an error? Nope, we don't have an error, right? Why didn't it console the log I'm currently? Ah, I keep doing this mistake. Remember, index is 0 and I'm making count 0 because I declared count as 0. So 0 is not less than 0. So, my bad. Let's make this 3. So you can see hello world and the index is currently 0 and then we have 20 here. So let me expand my screen. So run this again, right? And now ideally it should throw an error because I have a constant called sample and then I'm having another constant called okay, no, it shouldn't. Let me be sure of what I'm saying. Exactly. So ideally, it should have thrown an error because I declared a constant called sample. And then in the same script, I'm declaring another constant called sample, right? I remember we said constant variables are what they are. They're constant. They don't change. So I can't do this and I can't even do this, right? So you can see we have two different error messages. In the first error message, I was being told um, identifier sample has already been declared. So declared is when I do this, meaning you create a variable and assign it a value. You declared it, right? And then here is an assignment I'm trying to do, meaning I'm trying to give it another value. An assignment is when you have what this the equal and then the value to the right, right? So I'm trying to reassign it to sample and again it shouldn't work. So like I said, but when I comment this out and run this code, it works fine. And then you were wondering, but I thought he said constants are constant. That is because in programming, there are things we call scopes, right? There are things we call contexts. So in this context, now, as long as JavaScript is concerned, the sample you're declaring here is in a different context from this one, right? So like there was this, if you're on the call I had, there was this um, Rush Hour scene, popular scene from Rush Hour when Chris Tucker was like, "Who are you?" And then he was asking for, "Who are you?" And then the monk guy, the old monk's name was actually you, or Chinese guys have you as the name, like why you probably. But Chris Tucker is English and he's thinking, he's asking like, "Who are you?" Like the why who you, and then the blind guy's like, "I am you," and he's like, "No, who are you?" And then it's like I think it make more sense if I can just play that scene. So you could come here and watch it actually. Who are you? Don't know if it would capture my sound.
We'll be asking the questions, old man. Who are you?
You.
No, not me, you.
Yes, I am you.
Just answer the damn questions. Who are you?
I have told you.
Are you deaf?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
That is what I just said.
You just said what?
I did not say what. I said you.
That's what I'm asking you.
And you is answering.
Shut up. You.
Yes?
Not you, him. What's your name?
Me.
Yes, you.
I am me.
He's me. And I'm you.
And I'm about to whoop your old ass, man, because I'm sick of playing games. You, me, everybody's ass around here. Him, I'm going to kick his ass. I'm sick of this.
And that's how we just became Chris Tucker because you're like, who is sample? Like Tony told us sample, you can't have a constant variable called sample and then declare the same constant again because it's unchangeable. And in this case, we have two constants. So for Christ's sake, who are you? Yeah, okay, you're actually asking sample, who are you, right? And this is where it gets interesting because unlike Chris Tucker here, you would come to realize there is something called scopes and is in an English way of saying context, right? So if Chris Tucker had probably been around Chinese, he actually has been around Asians. I mean, his partner was Jackie Chan, so well, so but if he had been around Asians, he would have known that when he got into that dojo, which is what they call their temples, right? When he got into the dojo, right? He should have realized. I can't believe I exposed my WhatsApp message to you guys. He should have realized that hey, I'm in a Chinese or I'm in a karat place, right? And there are Asians here, and obviously an Asian's name can be you, and he should have known that. Okay, if I say who are you, it probably means someone's name could be you here, right? And me actually could be someone else's name, which is MI. Probably that's how they would spell me. I don't know. I'm not Asian, but so the point is, he should have. I don't like the way I'm exposing my, my screen to you guys. He should have realized that um in the context, you might not just be the English way of asking someone like, who are you? Who is this person, right? It could actually be someone's name, you, right? Same thing here. So with JavaScript, there is what we call scope. So as far as JavaScript is concerned, this is a different scope in which you are allowed to use sample here. But like I explained in the last video, there are certain things you do in a scope that can affect things outside the scope, right? And this is what I mean here. So if I come here and I try to reassign sample to 20, now I'm looking for trouble because I'm actually saying, go to the memory location where you have sample and I want you to reassign sample to 20 now, right? Or assign 20 to sample. And now we're going to have an issue, right? So JavaScript is telling us in line 28, which is here. Later on, I'm going to show you guys how to understand these error messages, right? So line 28, which is here, we're trying to assign 20 to sample. And now in this case, we have left the business of our scope to try to affect something outside the scope. And this is JavaScript's way of maintaining integrity, right? Not like political integrity, but like trying to make sure that things happen within their confines, right? In such a way that they don't affect things outside themselves, except you explicitly want them to be able to. So in this case, in the way I've written this code, I don't want anything to reassign or touch sample in the global context, right? But with the curly braces and the loop, with the scoping, so whenever I say scope, just understand anything that's within the curly braces, right? Within the curly braces, right, I can do whatever I want to do, right? I can, like I said, come back here and make const sample equals 20, right? And JavaScript has no problem because as far as it's concerned, you are using your sample here for whatever thing you want to do, right? Within your for statement, right? Your for loop, right? Whatever thing you want to do with your own sample you've declared, it's not his business. As far as his own sample outside here is fine. So meaning if I come here and I log sample, right? You should see 20 and 53, right? So JavaScript says, okay, within the context of your for loop, this is what you wanted sample to be, and this is how you wanted to use sample. So I wanted to check if sample, uh, if let me not make it complex. Just know whatever thing I want to do with sample, right? JavaScript, well, it's within the for loop, it's within his dojo. He can do whatever he wants to do with it. JavaScript has no problem, right? And then when JavaScript is done with my for loop and it comes out, he says, oh, he wants me to console the log sample. What sample is he talking about? And probably you would ask yourself, how does, or let me even make it make sense. Let me comment this sample out. So now what sample do you think JavaScript would log out? Do you think it would log out 20 or 53? And let me clear this and give you 5 seconds to think. I count terribly. So now 5 seconds, and then let's run this, and you would actually see 53. And then you're like we talk, what exactly is happening? Like I have two samples in this script, right? I have sample in the for loop, I have sample outside the for loop, right? Now, why am I saying 53? Why am I not saying 20, right? And it's simple because globally, right, we declared sample to be 53. When I say globally, means without, it's not in the context, right? It's not in the block, technically, right? Even though there's this function wrapping that happens, but let's leave that. But globally, we declared sample to be 53, right? And so when we say console.log sample, JavaScript doesn't use this sample because this sample is in a different context. It's within the for loop. Meaning if it was even in an if statement, JavaScript doesn't care because the if statement, like I told you, once you have the curly braces, it's a different context. You can do whatever you want as long as you're not trying to reassign the value if the variable declared outside the scope, which is this thing here, is not a constant, right? So pretty much just understand, and if you get confused, you're not the first because this guy almost lost his mind.
Just answer the damn questions. Who are you?
I have told you.
Are you deaf?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
In order not to be Chris Tucker, you really have to understand scopes and how they really work, right? So having said that, I think I should have touched on every possible thing someone can touch on. So yeah, I would expect us to have a lot of issues, right? Because scopes, even for people who have been programming, tends to be very tricky, right? But with time, once you've made a lot of done a lot of practice and you've it's just more it's a practice based it's a practiced and you the more you practice the more you understand it, right? So but just understand whenever you get confused, the video I showed you about Chris Tucker, right? And who are you, right? It's all about the context and knowing your environment, which he did not because he wasn't aware that he was in an Asian dojo or in which you could have people actually bear the name you and me. And I'm pointing at myself like me, not me like MI. I don't know how Asians will spell me. Hopefully, if an Asian sees this video, he might comment and tell me how they spell me. But yeah, so I think this should do justice to loops and things that concern them. So have a good one and see you guys in future.